Hello again, my friends, and welcome back to another edition of Top Hat Tales, so called because of my lovely top hat. I'm sorry we've been gone for a while. We experienced some technical difficulties, but those have been fixed for now. And so, shall we continue with our selection of stories? Uh, this week I've chosen a lovely one called The Fox and the Wolf, and as you can see, I've asked the other storytellers to let me step in and tell it, because the fellow antics of my fellow canines Anyway, the antics of my fellow canines are always of great amusement to me. So, and shall we begin? At the foot of some high mountains, there was, once upon a time, a small village, and a little way off met two roads, one of them going to the east, and the other going to the west. The villagers were quiet, hard-working folk who toiled in the fields all day, and in the evening set out for home when the bell began to ring in the little church. Because simple people are simple, there's nothing wrong with that. In the summer mornings they would let out their flocks to pasture, and were happy and contented from sunrise to sunset. However, this can never last, can it? One summer night, when a round full moon shone down upon the white road, a great wolf came trotting along around the corner. "I positively must get a good meal before I go back to my den," he said to himself, because, you talk to yourself about those kinds of things, just admit it. "It's been nearly a week since I've tasted anything but scraps, though perhaps no one could think it to look at my figure. Ho ho! Of course there are plenty of rabbits and hares in the mountains, but you need to be a greyhound to catch those, and I'm not so young as I once was. If only I could dine off of that fox I saw a fortnight ago, curled up into a delicious ball, I should ask nothing better. I would have eaten her up then, but unluckily her husband was lying beside her, and one knows that foxes great and small will also run like the wind. Really, it seems as there's not a living creature left for me to prey upon but a wolf, and one wolf does not bite another, goes the proverb. However, let us see what this village can produce. I'm as hungry as a schoolmaster, because, apparently schoolmasters don't eat very much. I don't know. I don't get that one. Now, while these thoughts are running through the mind of the wolf, the very fox that he'd been thinking of was galloping along the other road. "The whole of this day I've listened to those village hens clucking till I could hear it no longer," she murmured as she bounded along, hardly seeming to touch the ground. "When you are fond of fowl and eggs, it is the sweetest of all music, and as sure as there is a sun in heaven I will have some of them to-night, for I have grown so thin that it seems my very bones rattle, and my poor babies are crying for food." And as she spoke she reached a little plot of grass where the two roads joined, and flung herself under a tree to take a little rest, and to settle her plans. At this moment the wolf came along. At the sight of the fox lying within his grasp his mouth began to water, but his joy was somewhat checked when she noticed how thin she was. The fox's quick ears heard the sound of his paws, though they were soft as velvet, and she turned her head, saying politely, "Oh, is that you, neighbor? What a strange place to meet in! I do hope you are quite well." "Quite well regards my health," answered the wolf, whose eyes glistened greedily. "At least as well as one can be when one is very hungry. But what is the matter with you? A fortnight ago you were as plump as a heart could wish." "Oh, I have been ill, very ill," replied the fox, "and what you say is quite true, for a worm is fat in comparison with me." "He is. Still, you are good enough for me, for to the hungry no bread is too hard." "Oh, you are always joking. I am sure you are not half as hungry as I." "Well, that we'll soon see," cried the wolf, and he opened his huge mouth and crouched for a spring. "What are you doing?" exclaimed the fox, stepping backwards. "What am I doing? I'm going to have my supper off of you in less time it takes the cock to crow." "Well, I suppose you must have your joke," answered the fox lightly, never moving her eye from the wolf, who replied with a snarl which showed all his teeth, "I don't want to joke, but to eat." Surely a person of your talents must perceive that you might eat me to the very last morsel and never know you had swallowed anything at all." "In this world the cleverest people are always the hungriest," replied the wolf. "Oh, how true that is! But—" "I can't stop to listen to your buts and yets," broke in the wolf rudely. "Let us get to the point, and the point is I wish to eat you and not talk to you." "Have you no pity for a poor mother?" asked the fox, putting her tail to her eyes and peeping slyly out of them all the same. "I am dying of hunger," answered the wolf, "and you know," he added with a grin, "that charity begins at home." "But you must know that in this village there is a rich man who makes in the summer enough cheeses to last him the whole year, and keeps them in an old well, now dry, in his courtyard. By the well hang two buckets on a pole that were used in former days to draw up water. For many nights I have crept down to the palace, and have lowered myself into the bucket, bringing home with me enough cheeses to feed my children. All I beg of you is to come with me, and instead of hunting chickens and such, I will make a good meal off cheeses before I die." "Ah, but the cheeses may be all finished by now." "If you were only to see the quantities of them," laughed the fox, "and if they were finished, there would always be me to eat." "Well, I will come. Lead the way. But I warn you that if you try to escape or play any tricks, you are reckoning without your host, that is to say, without my legs, which are as long as yours." All was silent in the village, and not a light was to be seen but that of the moon, which shone bright and clear in the sky. The wolf and the fox crept silently along, when suddenly they stopped and looked at one another. A savory smell of frying bacon reached their noses, and it reached the noses of the sleeping dogs in the town, who began to bark greedily. "Is it safe to go on, think you?" asked the wolf in a whisper. The fox shook his head. "Not while the dogs are barking," said she. "Someone might come out to see if anything was the matter." And so she signed to the wolf to curl himself up in the shadow beside her. In about half an hour the dogs grew tired of barking, or perhaps the bacon was all eaten up, and there was no smell to excite them. And then the wolf and the fox jumped up and hastened to the foot of the wall. "I'm lighter than he is," thought the fox to herself. "Perhaps if I make haste I can get a start, and jump over the wall on the other side before he manages to spring over this one." And she quickened her pace, but if the wolf could not run he could jump, and with one bound he was beside his companion. "What were you going to do, comrade?" "Oh, nothing," replied the fox, much vexed at the failure of her plan. "I think if I were to take a bite out of your haunch you would jump better," said the wolf, giving a snap at her as she spoke. The fox drew back uneasily. "Be careful, or I shall scream," she snarled. And the wolf, understanding all that might happen if the fox cried out her threat, gave signal to his companion to leap onto the wall, where he immediately followed her. Once on the top, they crouched down and looked about them. Not a creature was to be seen in the courtyard. In the furthest corner from the house there stood the well, with its two buckets suspended from a pole, just as the fox had described it. The two thieves dragged themselves noiselessly along the wall till opposite the well, and by stretching out her neck as far as it would go, the fox was able to make out that there was only very little water in the bottom, but just enough to reflect the moon, big and round and yellow. "How lucky!" she cried to the wolf. "There is a huge cheese the size of a mill wheel. Look, look! Did you ever see anything so beautiful?" "Never!" answered the wolf, peering over in his turn, his eyes glinting greedily, for he imagined that the moon's reflection in the water was really a cheese. "And now, unbeliever, what have you to say?" The fox laughed gently. "That you are a woman, I mean a fox, of your word," replied the wolf. "Well, then, go down into that bucket and eat your fill," said the fox. "Oh, is that your game?" asked the wolf. "No, no, the person who goes down in the bucket will be you, and if you don't go down, your head will go down without you." "Of course I will go down, and with the greatest pleasure," answered the fox, who had expected the wolf's reply. "And be sure you don't eat all the cheese, or it will be the worse for you," continued the wolf. But the fox looked up to him with tears in her eyes. "Farewell, suspicious one," she said sadly, and climbed into the bucket. In an instant she had reached the bottom of the well, and found the water was not deep enough to cover her legs. "Why, it is larger and richer than I had thought," she cried, turning towards the wolf, who was leaning over the wall of the well. "Then be quick and bring it up," commanded the wolf. "How can I, when it weighs more than I do?" asked the fox. "If it's so heavy, then bring it up in bits, of course." "But I have no knife. You'll have to come down yourself, and we'll carry it up between us." "And how am I to come down?" inquired the wolf. "Oh, you really are very stupid. Get into the other bucket. It is nearly over your head." The wolf looked up and saw the bucket hanging there, and with some difficulty he climbed into it. As he weighed at least 4 times as much as the fox, the bucket went down with a jerk, and the other bucket, in which the fox was seated, came up to the surface. As soon as he understood what was happening, the wolf began to speak like an angry wolf, but was little comforted when he remembered that the cheese was still remaining with him. "But where is the cheese?" he asked of the fox, who in her turn was leaning over the parapet, watching his proceedings with a smile. "The cheese?" answered the fox. "Why, I'm taking it home to my babies, who are too young to get food for themselves." "Traitor!" cried the wolf, howling with rage. But the fox was not there to hear his insult, for she had gone off to a neighboring fowl house, where she had noticed some fat young chickens the day before. "Perhaps I did treat him rather badly," she said to herself. "But it seems to be getting cloudy, and if there's a heavy rain the other bucket will fill and sink to the bottom, and his will go up. Well, at least his may." And that is my story about how one of my fellow wolves was outwitted by a fine lady fox. I do hope you enjoyed it. It has been an excellent tale in telling it, and far overdue. I hope that everything finds you in good health and not too hungry.